Hi students, I am Richa Shukla, your educator from Study Room. Let us start your chapter, second, that is Nelson Mandela, Long Walk to Freedom. Alright, so first let's get to know about who was Nelson Mandela and who is the author. Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela was a South African anti-apartheid revolutionary. Anti-apartheid was basically a movement that, was started to call out the racism that existed when the British were there in the South Africa. He was also a statesman and a philanthropist who served as the president of South Africa from 1994 to 1999. He was the country's first black head of state. That means he was the country's first head of state who was black and elected, okay? So he was the first elected in a fully representative democratic election. That means the first democratic election that South Africa had, they elected Mr. Nelson Mandela. Alright, so let's get to know about the theme of the story. The lesson, Long Walk to Freedom, talks about the sacrifices. Alright, it talks about all the sacrifices that Nelson Mandela made in his life to remove the social inequality from his country. That means this lesson will basically be reading about all the sacrifices, all right? All the problems and everything that Nelson Mandela had to undergo in order to remove what? Social inequality in his country. All right. He says he wants a nation where he can do whatever he wants freely without discriminatory rules and regulations. So what did Nelson Mandela basically want? He wanted a nation wherein he could do anything he wants freely. Anything as in every right thing, alright? There shouldn't be, a problem in doing things. There shouldn't be unnecessary rules and regulations, and especially discriminatory rules and regulations, Some people can do it, some people cannot. No discrimination. That was his basic want. The central theme is social inequality as well as his courage and his sacrifices. So, the central theme of the story of this chapter is how Nelson Mandela worked to remove the social inequality as well as the sacrifices he had to make, the problems he had to undergo, and all that courage he had to do this. Alright, so let's first start with the explanation, okay? 10th May dawned bright and clear. For the past few days, I had been pleasantly besieged by dignitaries and world leaders who were coming to pay their respects before the inauguration. The inauguration would be the largest gathering ever of international leaders on the South African soil. That means, so what was the date? The date was 10th May, and it was a very bright and clear day, The sun was out and everything was nice. And he was, Nelson Mandela was very surprised by the amount of leaders that were coming to South Africa just for the inauguration of it. So he was, feeling very glad. He was feeling, somewhere very humbled that, so many people and so many dignitaries and important people and world leaders were coming to South Africa. This was probably the largest gathering of international leaders on the South African soil. The ceremonies took place in the lovely sandstone amphitheatre formed by the Union Buildings in Pretoria. Where did the ceremonies take place? Okay, you have a picture here as well. Please look at the picture clearly. So the ceremonies took place in a sandstone amphitheatre, and as you can see, it's very, very beautiful. And who was it formed by? It was formed by the Union Buildings in Pretoria. For decades, this has been the siege of white supremacy. Alright, this place had been a mark of white supremacy, but now it was a site of rainbow gathering of different colors and nations for the installation of South Africa's democratic, non-racial government. Alright, so for a very long time, this amphitheatre had been what? A place, where white supremacy or British people used to rule from. But now what was it? It was basically a place where all people, different world leaders from different nations were coming in together for what? For South Africa's first non-racial and democratic government's inauguration. So it was a very, very happy occasion. On that very lovely autumn day, I was accompanied by my daughter, Zenani. So who was accompanying Nelson Mandela? His daughter, Zenani. Who was Zenani? Nelson Mandela's. I'm writing the initials. Please keep in mind that this is Nelson Mandela. That's Mandela, daughter. Alright. On the podium, Mr. De Klerk was first sworn in as second deputy president. Alright, so as the swearing in ceremony started, who was the first person? Mr. De Klerk, and he was the second deputy president. Then Thabo Mbeki or Thabo Mbeki was sworn in as the first deputy president. Alright. When it was my turn, I pledged to obey and uphold the constitution and devote myself to the well-being of the republic and its people. Then, first it was Mr. De Klerk, then it was Thabo Mbeki, and then it was finally Nelson Mandela's turn. So what he did, he took the pledge and he said that he pledged to uphold their constitution, to devote himself to the well-being of his nation and people. To the assembled guests and the watching world, alright, so many people had come and everybody was, very excited for the first democratic government in South Africa. So he made a speech. Today, all of us do, by our presence here, confer glory and hope to the newborn liberty. What is he saying here? He's saying that everybody who's here today, everybody who's watching the ceremony, they are, sort of upholding the glory that a democratic government holds and how, a democratic government provides liberty to its people. Out of the experience of an extraordinary human disaster that lasted too long, must be born a society of all which the humanity will be proud. That means, what extraordinary human disaster is he talking about here? He's talking about the British rule that was there in the colonial British rule that was there in Africa from a very, very long time. So he says that, it was a very disastrous rule, but from this, rule has risen a society, of that has very good morals of liberty, democracy, and it's a kind of society that will make everybody proud. We who were outlaws not so long ago have today been given the rare privilege to be host of nations of the world on our own soil. That means, so when they were fighting for the freedom of their country, Africa, Nelson Mandela, he was, called in outlaws by whom? The colonial government. Now what is he saying? Today, we have the rare privilege. That means today he has the, freedom to call other people to his country. That too for what? For the starting of democracy. We thank all of our distinguished international guests for having to come take possession with the people of our country of what it is, a common victory for justice, for peace, and for human dignity. So now he's thanking all the international guests for having come to Africa, so as to support the people of where? So as to support the people of Africa, because for the people of Africa, this was about justice, this was about peace in their country, and this was about the human dignity that these people of Africa had not received for a very long time by the colonial government. Next slide. We have at last achieved our political emancipation. We pledge ourselves to liberate all people from the continuing bondage of poverty, deprivation, suffering, gender, and other discrimination. So Nelson Mandela says, at last, after so many years, we have achieved, political emancipation means we have achieved democracy. And what does this government pledge? It pledges everybody to remove them from poverty, from deprivation. Deprivation means people not getting things. From suffering, that means from sadness and problems. And from all kinds of discriminations. Alright? Never and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression by one another. That means Nelson Mandela goes on to say that, this beautiful country, South Africa, will never ever be oppressed by any other country ever again. We are a free nation now. The sun shall never set on so glorious a human achievement. That means here he's saying that, he is comparing, this freedom of the country and the democracy of the country to a sunny day. He says that, the sun will never set on this achievement of South Africa. Let freedom reign. And he ends by saying, let freedom reign and God bless Africa. Now, let's start discussing the key terms here, all right? Confer means give, all right? We who were outlaws because of its policy of apartheid, many countries had earlier broken off their diplomatic relations with South Africa. So, I had already told you this. They were outlaws because people had broken their ties with Africa, all right? Emancipation, freedom from restriction. Deprivation basically means not having your rightful benefits, all right? Now, discrimination means, being treated differently than others or unfavorably, discrimination like on the basis of race, caste, gender, anything. All right, moving on. So now let's discuss your questions, all right? Where did the ceremonies take place? Can you name any public building in India that is made of sandstone? All right, so where did the ceremony take place? So it was the lovely sandstone theatre, amphitheatre, formed by the Union Buildings in Pretoria. Can you name any public buildings in India? Red Fort, as you all remember, is a very, very important building, and that too a public building in India that is made of sandstone. Can you see how 10th May is an autumn day in South Africa? Yes, 10th May was an autumn day because it was a day of change. Autumn is a season basically of change, when we are transitioning from summer to winter. Similarly, this was also a period of change for South Africa, wherein they were transitioning from, a colonial rule to a democracy. So 10th May was a clear, bright, sunny autumn day. What does Mandela thank the international leaders for? So Nelson Mandela thanks the international leaders because, as you all know, people had earlier made South Africa outlaws. They had broken their ties with them because of the apartheid movement. But now, as you know, South Africa was entering the phase of a democracy. Everybody was with South Africa. They were supporting them. And they had come from overseas to South Africa just to support this transition. All right, let's move ahead. Now, a few moments later, we all lifted our eyes in awe. A spectacular array of South African jets, helicopters, and troop carriers rode in a perfect formation over the Union buildings. So usually whenever, there's a very important government function taking place, all the military jets and everything, they form formations like it happens on Republic Day in India. Similarly, all of these jets, helicopters, and troop carriers made a very beautiful formation over the Union buildings. It was not only a display of the pinpoint precision and military force, but a demonstration of the military's loyalty to democracy, to a new government that had been freely and fairly elected. That means not only was this showing how important and well was the military force, how precise was the military force, but it was also showing that how the military was supporting the new democratic government, the freely elected government. Only moments before, the highest generals of South African Defence Force and Police, their chests bedecked with ribbons and medals from days gone by, saluted me and pledged their loyalty. That means all the highest generals, of the South African Defence Forces and Police, they had their medals on their chest and ribbons, all right, for all of those wars that they had, won, and all of the good deeds that they had done. They saluted Mr. Nelson Mandela and they pledged their loyalty to what? To a democratic government. They were also approving of the democratic government. I was not unmindful of the fact that not so many years before, they would have not saluted but arrested me. Now, these same generals, if, it would have been a few years ago under the colonial government, they would not, have supported Nelson Mandela, not saluted him. Instead, they would have arrested him because he was a revolutionary leader of the anti-apartheid movement. Finally, a chevron of Impala jets left a smoke trail of the black, red, green, blue and gold of the new South African flag. Alright, so what happens is the jets, they leave the color formations also during public functions. So what these people did, the jet also, it left a smoke trail of the black, red, green, blue and gold. All of these colors were a part of the new African flag. Alright, so that is why the jet, it threw all these colors out and it made a formation of it. The day was symbolized for me by playing of the two national anthems and the vision of whites singing Nurski Skill, I Africa, and the blacks singing Die Stem, the old anthem of the Republic. Alright, so what was happening in the ceremony was they were all singing two important national anthems. One was the anthem of the free and the newly formed democratic government, and the other was the old anthem. Now you have to, memorize both the names. Kosi Kellel, I Africa and Die Stem. Although that day, neither group knew the lyrics of the anthem they once despised, they would soon know the words by heart. So what happened that before, the democratic government and everything, people did not know this anthem very well. But now Nelson Mandela was very sure that they will learn the words by heart. On the day of the inauguration, I was overwhelmed with the sense of history. So after seeing all of this, Nelson Mandela was very, very emotional, and he was happy. He was feeling a lot of emotions after seeing what had happened in the inauguration. In the first decade of the 20th century, a few years after the Anglo-Boer War and before my own birth, the white-skinned peoples of South Africa patched up their differences and erected a system of racial domination against the dark-skinned people of their own land. So now he's telling a little bit of the history that what happened in the 20th century. So, there was a war, and after that war, what happened was the white-skinned people, or the outside settlers that had come to South Africa, they had a little bit of differences among them, but they cropped out those differences and set up a system of racial domination against the original natives of South Africa. Alright, so they set up a government or a system that basically discriminated against the original or the native people of South Africa. The structure they created formed the basis of one of the harshest, most inhumane societies the world has ever known. That means, so the structure that was created, it was, you might have read a lot in your earlier classes, maybe in your history class or maybe in your, social sciences class, that how problematic this whole, system was. It was firstly very, very, discriminatory. It was very harsh and it was almost inhumane, like normal people won't do this. So this society, now you can see an example for use by white persons. Alright, these public premises and amenities have been reserved for the exclusive of white people. That means even public places like bathrooms, toilets, they have been differentiated on the basis of white and black. Now what kind of humanity is this? Now, in the last decade of 20th century and my own 8th decade as a man, that means he was almost about 80 years old. So he says, this was what had happened in the first century of 20th century. Now, in the last decade of 20th century, that system had been overtuned by forever and replaced by one that recognized the rights and freedoms of all people, regardless of their skin color. That means now that system had been done away with and we had moved on to a more inclusive system known as a democracy that recognized the rights and freedoms of everybody and did not discriminate between anybody on the basis of their skin color. The day had come about through the unimaginable sacrifice of thousands of my people whose suffering and courage can never be counted or repaid. That means, and this freedom, it had not come easy for people. This freedom was a result of many people, who had given up so much, maybe lost their lives, and they had suffered so much, they had overcome so many problems, and they were very, very, courageous. That is why today, South Africa was a democratic nation. I felt that day, as I have on so many other days, that I was simply the sum of all those African patriots who had gone before me. That means what Nelson Mandela felt that day. He said that he was only, a res- he was only an addition, He was only the last person of, so many people that had been before him who had worked towards this dream of making South Africa a democratic country. So you can see all these people, they are very, very, they played an important role in the whole process. Oliver Tambo, Walter Cecil, Chief Lutley, Yusuf Dwadu, Bram Fisher, and everybody. That long and noble line ended now, and now began again with me. That means all of these people were now, not there in the world, but Nelson Mandela was there to take this forward. I was pained that I was not able to thank them, and that they were not able to see what their sacrifices had wrought. That means, somewhere or the other, he was happy that, all of these people had together worked towards this, but Nelson Mandela was a little sad and a little, he was feeling just, a little sad that the people who had worked so hard, who had almost given up their lives, had made so many sacrifices to see the country free, today were not in this world, they were not alive to see what they had brought. The policy of apartheid created a deep and lasting wound in my country and in my people. That means, the apartheid policy that differentiated on the basis of skin color, white and black, it was so problematic that it had left the African people, very wounded, and it had left them in trauma. All of us will spend many years, if not generations, recovering from that profound hurt. That means all of the people, will spend of Africa, of South Africa, will spend many years trying to forget what, the behavior they had received just because of their skin color. But the decades of oppression and brutality had another unintended effect, and that was that it produced Oliver Tambos, the Walter Cecilus, the Chef Lutleys, Yusuf Dadus, the Bram Fishers, the Robert Soberwooks of our time. That means, all of this oppression and brutality had another effect. What? That it gave birth and it gave rise to a lot of people, who were sort of revolutionary leaders who wanted to change in the country. And then he mentions the name of all of these people. Men of such extraordinary courage, wisdom, and generosity that their like may never be known again. That these people were very courageous, they were very wise, they had a lot of knowledge, and they were very, very generous human beings. And you might not see, such great human beings ever again. Perhaps it requires such depths of oppression to create such heights of character. Now, this is a very important line. Nelson Mandela says that, you need, such wise people and such, important people were only created because of oppression, because they had to undergo and suffer so much. My country is rich in the minerals and gems that lie beneath its soil, but I have always known that its greatest wealth is in its people, finer and truer than the purest diamonds. Now, South Africa, as we all know, has a great, mining place. It has very good diamonds and everything. So Nelson Mandela says, we might have a lot of diamonds and everything, but what we have, which is more important, is people who are finer and truer than the purest of diamonds that are found in the country. It is from these comrades in the struggle that I learned the meaning of courage. That means, he says, it is from these people that I got inspired, I learned wisdom, and I learned to be courageous. Time and again, I've seen men and women risk their lives for an idea. That means, time and again, he's seen people dying, even giving their lives just to make the country free. I've seen men stand up to attacks and torture without breaking, showing a strength and resilience that defies the imagination. So, obviously, there also used to be physical torture that used to be inflicted on revolutionary leaders. So Nelson Mandela says, I've seen people withstand so much of torture, so much of pain, that you might not even be able to imagine how much they've suffered. But they did it. They did it so that today, we could be free. I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. So he says that, to be courageous and to be bold doesn't mean that you don't have to be you have to be fearless. You just have to overcome your fears. All right. The brave man is not who does not feel afraid, but the one who conquers that fear. You are a brave person. Nelson Mandela says that you're a brave person, not when you don't feel afraid of anything, but you're a brave person when you feel afraid of something and you overcome that fear. No one is born hating another person because of the color of their skin, his background, or his religion. So he says a very important point here. He says, when you're born, or, nobody is, born discriminating. It's only when, you grow up in a particular environment, you are programmed to think, such lowly. Only then do you discriminate people on the basis of their skin, on the basis of their color or religion. People must learn to hate. And if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love, for love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite. Now, then Nelson Mandela says, hate does not come naturally to people. People learn to hate. And if they can, learn to hate, people can easily learn to love, because love comes more easy to the human heart. Even at the grimmest times in prison, when my comrades and I were pushed to our limits, I would see a glimmer of humanity in one of the guards. So he says, even, the people who were against us, the colonial government, when we were, put into prison and everything, when we were tortured, when we were physically pushed to our limits, I could see that there was humanity in the guards, that they did not want to do it. Perhaps just for a second, but it was enough to reassure me and keep me going, Maybe he saw it just for a second, but it was very, very, enough for Nelson Mandela just to keep going as a person. Man's goodness is a flame that can be hidden but never extinguished. Everybody has something good inside them, and you can hide it, you can pretend that you're a bad person, but in the end it will come out. Your goodness will stand out. Now let's look at some key terms. Spectacular array, an impressive display. Mindful of, conscious of, or aware of. Chevron is basically a pattern in V. So you see this pattern, this is called chevron. Despised, had a very low opinion of. Wrought means old-fashioned, done or achieved. Profound means deep and strong. Resilience means the ability to deal with any kind of hardship and recover from its effects. Push to our limit basically means push to the last point in our ability to bear pain. Now let's see the questions. What do the military generals do? How has their attitude changed and why? Alright, so the military generals now salute Nelson Mandela. They accept the democratic government. How has the attitude changed? Earlier, because Nelson Mandela was a revolutionary leader of the anti-apartheid movement, they would have arrested Nelson Mandela if they ever saw him, instead of saluting him, because he was doing something that was not allowed in the colonial government. Why were two national anthems sung? Two national anthems sung because one was the national anthem that existed before the new government, democratic government, was made, and one was the new anthem of the republic government. Now let's continue. In life, every man has two twin obligations. Obligations to his family, to his parents, to his wife and children, and then he has obligations to his people, his community, his country. Alright, so here Nelson Mandela says, in life you have two obligations. You have obligations to your near ones, like to your family, to your friends, to your wife, to your children, and then the second obligation you have to your country, to your people, and to your community. In a civil and humane society, each man is able to fulfill those obligations according to his own inclinations and abilities. Now, here he says that, if in a free country, every human being is able to sort of fulfill both of the obligations as and when he wants. First he focuses on his himself and his family, and then he focuses on his country. But in the end, he fulfills all the obligations. But in a country like South Africa, it was almost impossible for a man of my birth and color to fulfill both of these obligations. But what used to happen in South Africa? A black person could not, and it was almost impossible for him to fulfill the obligations. In South Africa, a man of color who attempted to live as a human was being punished and isolated. So in South Africa, if a person wanted to live normally, a black person wanted to have every right that a white person had, they were punished. In South Africa, a man who tried to fulfill his duty to his people was inevitably ripped from his family and his home and was forced to live in a life apart, a twilight existence of secrecy and rebellion. That means if somebody wanted to, sort of fulfill, wanted to do something for their country, they had to live away from their family, because then the family would be affected as well. The family had to face the brunt. So these people had to live in secrecy and in rebellion. I did not in the beginning choose to place my people above my family, but in an attempt to serve my people, I found that I was prevented from fulfilling my obligation as a son, a brother, and a father, and a husband. That means, somewhere or the other, Nelson Mandela did not see it coming that, if he places his country over his family, he would sort of just ignore all the duties and obligations he had as a family man. I was not born with a hunger to be free. I was born free in every way that I wanted. I could know. So he says that, he was not born with a hunger to be free. He was already born free, right? Free to run in the fields near my mother's hut, free to swim in the clear streams in my village, free to roast mealies under the stars and ride the broad backs of slow-moving boats. Basically, here he's talking about how we take granted the little freedoms that we have in life. As long as I obeyed my father and abided by the customs of the tribe, I was not troubled by the laws of the man or God. As long as, basically Nelson Mandela says he was not doing anything wrong, he was obeying all the rules that, his father had as a parent and all the laws that his tribe has, he could live his life on his own terms. It was only when I began to learn that my boyhood freedom was an illusion, when I discovered that as a young man that my freedom had already been taken from me, that it began the hunger for it. But obviously when he grew, then he noticed, the problems that existed in his country, the discrimination on the basis of his color. That was where he got to know that his freedom was actually not there. It was an illusion. At first, as a student, I wanted freedom only for myself. The transitory freedoms of being able to stay out at night, read what I pleased, and go out where I chose. So the freedom, he wanted in different ways. At first, he wanted it only for himself, He wanted to go out at night. He wanted to read the texts. He wanted to, he wanted to do whatever he wanted to do. Later, as a young man in Johannesburg, I yearned for the basic and honorable freedoms of achieving my potential, of earning my keep, of marrying and having a family, the freedom not to be abstracted in a lawful life. That means, but as he grew, he realized the problems, okay? He realized how severe they were, all right? He wanted his pay, he wanted his, honorable freedom of being a young man who wanted to do whatever he wanted to do, to marry, and to live a life that was free, that did not have, unnecessary laws and problems. But then I slowly saw that not only was I not free, but my brothers and sisters were not free. He noticed that now this was not a problem that was only for him. This was a problem that was for all his South African sisters and brothers. I saw that it was not just my freedom that was curtailed, but the freedom of everybody who I looked like. That means the freedom of everybody who was black. That was when I joined the African National Congress. And that was when he joined a political party. That was when the hunger for my own freedom became the hunger for the freedom of my people. That was when his hunger for his freedom transitioned into the hunger for the freedom of a democratic country. It was this desire for the freedom of my people to live their lives with dignity and self-respect that animated his life. This was something that drove him. This was something that, the people wanted to live a normal life. His, kind of people wanting to live a normal life, that was something that, transformed a frightened young man. That means it transformed him as a person into a bold and a courageous person. That drove a law-abiding attorney to become a criminal. That turned a family-loving husband into a man without a home. That forced life-living man to live like a monk. That means, obviously when you are becoming a revolutionary person, you have to give up everything in your life. You have to, sort of work against the laws. You have to leave your house. You have to start living like a monk. I am no more virtuous or self-sacrificing than the next man. But I found that I could not even enjoy the poor and limited freedoms I was allowed when I knew that my people were not free. So the problem is, when you become a revolutionary leader, when you fight against, unjust people, you lose every bit of freedom you have, because you always live in that fear that, you might be arrested, you might be taken away, you might be put into prison. So that was what Nelson Mandela also realized, that he did not have any freedom as he worked towards the, change in the government of his country. Freedom is indivisible. The chains of any one of my people with the chains on all of them. That means, he said that, maybe, some privileged black people did not, have that many problems in their lives. They had a little bit more freedom. But that doesn't mean that, some people having freedom meant that the other people could also have it. They did not, right? So this is what he's saying here. I knew that the oppressor must be liberated just as surely as the oppressed. That means he says, the oppressor is way more liberated than the oppressed people. A man who takes away another man's freedom is a prisoner of hatred. He is locked behind the bars of prejudice and narrow-mindedness. So he says that anybody who does wrong things, anybody who, sort of prisons other people, has other people's hate coming upon him. He has, been put in prison of what? Narrow-mindedness. I am not truly free if I'm taking away someone else's freedom, just as surely as I'm not free when I'm sure that my freedom is taken from me. So here he sees a very important thing, that, he feels that he is not truly free. If I take somebody else's freedom, I also, have a sort of chain on myself. So if my freedom is taken away from me, I have a chain on myself too. The oppressed and the oppressor alike are robbed of their humanity. What is more important is, both oppressor and the people who are oppressed have no humanity left in them. Now look at some key terms. Inevitably means unavoidably. Transitory means not permanent. Illusion means something that appears to be real but is actually not. Curtailed means reduced, alright? What twin obligations does Mandela mention? He mentions that, people have two obligations in life. One is to serve their country, their community, their people. And the second is to fulfill some obligations and to serve their family, their friends, their near and dear ones, etc. Does Mandela think the oppressor is free? No, Nelson Mandela does not think the oppressor is free, because he is oppressed by the fact that he is actually, curtailing the freedom of somebody else, and so the humanity in him dies. Plus, he is also chained by the hatred that he received from the people he has oppressed. Now let's look at the questions, okay? These are long answer questions. Why did such a large number of international leaders attend the inauguration? What did it signify the triumph of? A large number of international leaders attended the inauguration because they supported the change of South Africa into a democratic nation, and they were supportive of the fact that Africa had finally won the battle against the colonial government. It signified the triumph of the original or native people, of the black people, and the end of racism. What did Mandela mean when he says he's simply the sum of all those African patriots who had gone before him? Now here he means to say that a lot of people before him, a lot of African patriots before him, had actually sacrificed a lot, alright? He was only the last person who had done all of this. How did Mandela's understanding of freedom change with age and experience? So basically, when he was young, he used to think that he's free because, he was a young boy. He had not seen the world a lot. But as he grew up, he, wanted freedom. When he became a teenager, when he was in college, he wanted freedom to, read the kind of books he wanted, go out, have fun. But then as he grew into a man, he realized that he was not free at all and they were chained by the colonial government. So he joined the African National Congress and started to become a revolutionary leader. Now let's do a very quick revision of the chapter. 10th of May was the day of freedom for the South Africa, and there was a huge gathering of international leaders and dignitaries. The first non-racial government took charge. So 10th of May, what was happening? The first non-racial government was taking charge. So a lot of people outside, that means international leaders, had come, and even big dignitaries. Nelson Mandela gave a speech on the victory for the justice, peace and human dignity. He gave a very good speech. He pledged to liberate the people from poverty, suffering and discrimination that they previously had when there was a racial government. Two national anthems were sung, the old Kosi Kelil by the whites and the new Die Stem by the blacks. So a new system in Africa was formed that recognized the rights and freedom of all people. Mandela remembered and thanked all the people who had, sacrificed all the previous freedom fighters like Oliver Tambo, Walter Sisulu, Chief Luthuli, Yusuf Dadu and other people. According to Mandela, freedom has many aspects. Real freedom, however, it means equality between different kind of people. Mandela believed that the oppressor and the oppressed had to be liberated in order for true liberation. Alright, with this part of your chapter comes to an end. Now I'll meet you in the next part of your chapter. I hope you understood everything. Bye.